Hi, I'm Tim, and welcome to TimTomTalks. I'm the CEO of 4i Leadership, and I'm here in Sydney, Australia.
And I'm Dr. Tom, and I'm the EVP of the Americas, and I'm in Los Angeles, California, the United States.
We're going to be focusing in our first series of broadcasts on performance at a team level and looking at the key elements through which a leader can drive that team performance.
Fantastic. Let's
I
get
think so.
started.
I think so. So just a quick run through, what are the key elements? And then Tom and I are going to talk a little bit about why they're important and how leaders can influence them and drive performance through recognizing and improving them. So we look at them in two modes. One is the sort of structural framework, transactional stuff that makes a team effective and then becomes a high performing team. And then the sort of sustaining, maintaining, and ultimately sort of transformational work that holds, maintains, and builds and ultimately sustains high team performance over time.
Tim, when you say the structural, what makes up a structure of a team?
Yeah, so we break that down to three areas. And it's basically the sort of the frameworks and the concepts and the constructs that individuals and teams work within. So that's goals. What are you doing and why? Roles. What's your part to play in achieving the goals? And then the processes, which you would also include, procedures and protocols that exist within, the world, the country that you're working in, and the organization itself. So those three things: goals, roles, processes. Those are the structures that drive a team's performance.
Okay. And for this campaign that we're running, what we're going to do is each week we're going to focus on each one of those, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start with those three, and then we'll have kind of a little bit of a back look and a review, and then we'll move into the next three, which are adaptability, connectivity, and resilience. So that basically once you've got these structures, you can't just rely on them in perpetuity. They're going to need to have some flex. They're going to need to have some wiggle room. Essentially, you're going to need to change and adapt them as you bring a new product to market that maybe needs to be delivered in a new way, or you get a disruption in the market, which means that your goals need to shift, or you get a change in the organizational structure or the organization's ownership and the view on what roles should be changes. So how your team responds to change and how adaptable the team is, that's one of these transformational areas. Then we look at connectiveness. So that's what essentially most people refer to as relationships. How do the relationships and the likableness, the reliability, the amount of trust, do we actually come together as a team when times get tough, or do we fall apart? That's connectedness. And then the last one is resilience, which you could ultimately take any of these in any area, in any order you like. But again, change is constant. It's coming. It's just a matter of when and with what significance. So how resilient are you to keep going, keep getting up if you get knocked down as a unit? That's the last of those transformational areas.
I think what people are going to think first when they hear all of this is we're talking about performance, and in none of this have you said productivity.
Okay.
Why is that?
Because productivity ultimately emanates out of all of this, right? So if you don't have goals, productivity is essentially meaningless because you've been productive applying yourself to what specific outcome. You need a role scope and a structure to operate within in order for your productivity to be applied individually and aligned collectively with everybody else in the team. And
as well as the organization.
As well as the organization and the customers and the suppliers and who is doing what, when, where, why, all of that stuff. And then the, brain fail, where was I? Processes. The processes are part of what makes productivity, right? So processes, the two E's, efficiency and effectiveness, that drives productivity, but it's not enough. And a lot of the time, and I'm sure you'd have a view on this. I see people looking at productivity just through those two lenses. We need to be more efficient. We need to be more effective, and then we'll be more productive. And I know you have a far broader spectrum on what actually makes people productive these days.
Well, the reality is that if you don't have clear goals, there's going to be ambiguity, and that's going to affect productivity, and that's going to affect overall performance. If you have ambiguity in your role and you don't know how you fit into a team or the organization, again, you're going to get into a lot of role ambiguity and trust. And when it comes to roles, you're going to end up with, it is going to affect trust, and it's going to affect communication, which then affects productivity and overall performance. So in each one of these things, if you don't have them, they're like building blocks. If you don't have them, any one of them can affect performance. But high performance teams will have all of these things.
They'll have all of them, and they'll have all of them at a high level of competency, and they'll be maintaining that high level of competency over time and through and in spite of these sort of systemic organizational or market-based shocks. And I mean, again, just to circle back a little bit there around the productivity piece, productivity, systems, processes, that's great. But let's look at resilience at an organizational team and an individual level. If you've got people who are massively stressed and not feeling like they've got a relationship in that connectedness area, which means that they can trust and depend on someone to cover for them if they've got a sick child at home or they're running late because of traffic, that's going to reduce the overall resilience, and then productivity takes a nosedive because that person, even when they're physically with the team or virtually, but they're doing their work, they've got all those little things going on in the back of their mind, which diminishes actually how productive they are.
Yeah, and we just worked with somebody yesterday where their teams they're working so much overtime, they're really it's unsustainable. And resilience is really about sustainability, because we don't want, even if you work in a seasonal workforce, you still need to have sustainability throughout your peak areas, but also during your lower areas, so you can create efficiencies during those times. So
it's an interesting term, because I think in a way, like I 100% agree with you. In a way, I almost feel like I wish we could use sustainability, as the governing term, with resilience then being a part of it. But obviously sustainability wrapped up so much now in climate and, ecology, it's kind of become an overly, kind of colored term. You can't say sustainability without writing it and underscoring it in green, and putting a little leaf next to it. So yeah, let's use resilience as a very, sort of suitable replacement. But yeah, that's what it's all about. It's about sustaining your performance, your output, your creativity, your productivity over time. And you need to be resilient in order to do that. But you also need to think about well-being and, sort of environment, yes, outside and globally in terms of climate, but also environment in the space you're in, with the relationships that you have with people, with the relationships with people you have outside of work, with your relationship with your own brain, what's under the hood, Tom, and don't show us what's under there today. I know. It's not pretty.
Not today.
Yeah. Not today. That's all.
Not today. This is why we have the hat on. But we know how to manage that. What are you going to do? So here's the other thing, is that when we're talking about overall high-performing teams, there's a lot of work that's been coming out in the last few years from MIT, Harvard, and you'll hear about collective intelligence.
Yeah.
High-performing teams have high collective intelligence. Now, those teams also, when you combine them, you'll hear collective intelligence as a team cohesion, and you'll hear it as a team cohesion with computers and how they're working with technology. And this collective intelligence is the highest form, and high collective intelligence is the highest form of productivity, performance, and overall well-being of a team that is sustainable. So this is almost like the top of a pyramid now. If we now had pyramids of, picture a Maslow pyramid, and self-awareness is the individual, high performance, collective intelligence is where we're shooting to. So But to get there, you've got to deal with the basics. You've got to deal with your goals. You've got to deal with your roles. You've got to deal with
Yeah,
your
this is exactly it. I think,
adaptability and
that
wisdom.
that collective intelligence, that's something that maybe 10 or 15 years ago, would have been looked at as a nuance, would have been something ephemeral, sort of intangible. Why is it that that team that we know is high performing, they're doing all this other stuff and they've got all these additional outputs? We can now use a diagnostic to say it's because of collective intelligence. But again, to your previous comment, like these 6 areas that we're talking about and how the leader is the biggest influence in using them as building blocks, foundation stones to get to high performance, maintain high performance. That collective intelligence is then an outcome of having that house built on the right foundations. And then once you've got that, then the collective intelligence, which was seeded earlier on in the construction process, then it will start to bloom. But if you pull one of the foundation stones out, it's going to start to diminish really fast.
Right. So that's why we decided to focus on leadership and performance in our first campaign here. That's why we are dealing with the fundamentals of what builds a high performing team. This impacts your overall wellness of the organization, behavior of the organization, the culture of the organization, the performance. And what am I missing?
Oh, well, look, I mean, let's be frank. It comes down to profitability, and even in, a public or, governmental or a not-for-profit, sector, you've still got a budget that you're accountable to maintaining, and I mean, as a quick aside, I much prefer to not-for-profit the term for purpose. And I think that in a way can actually be really helpful, for organizations who don't need to return a dividend to shareholders to reconcile the fact that talking about money and needing to, retain income and generate a financial return is imperative, because if they haven't got money, they can't do much. And I was talking with a senior executive at a big global charity that's based in Sydney recently, and she was pointing to exactly that problem, that the people at the top, the leaders, are fundamentally undermining the performance and the structural capability of the organization, because they don't want to talk about money, and they don't want to talk about why people are stressed to the max and the resilience is like tanking, and therefore the processes are falling apart because people aren't doing the job properly. They're doing workarounds and they're just doing whatever they can because they know that there's not enough funds in the entity to deliver the frontline services to people who really, really depend on them. So that's a bit of a tangent, but I kind of tried to bring it back around, like you gotta bring it back to what's fundamental to the outcome you're trying to achieve.
Well, I mean, I think it's a great example of there's so many self-help books out there. There's so many leadership books out there. You see a gazillion coaches out there and consultants and everything. And you're like, well, of course, everybody should be a fantastic leader right now, right? Because there's so much available to them. But the reality is that while 70% of a high performance team is because of because of the leader, and what the leader does, there's so many examples, and probably 80%, I think it's 80% of the workforces are exactly what you described. The leadership isn't paying attention, or they're pushing the wrong agendas, or they're killing performance, or they're killing resiliency, or they're not helping people be more adaptable, or they're creating silos. All of these reasons, and that's very few organizations are running at the top of their game because of the leadership, or not coaching and training leaders the way that they need to.
I mean, look, leadership is, and I talk about this, openly, it's kind of part of my governing philosophy, but, leadership is very, very complicated. And it's, with everything that's happening, in the world today, it's getting more complex, not more simple. And when we talk about the big, sort of disruptive paradigms of AI and, sort of collective working and, leadership in the virtual environment, None of that is going to make leadership easier.
It's going to make it harder, actually.
It's going to make it harder. It might make it more efficient if you get it right. It might make it more effective if you get it right. But in order to do it right, you're going to have a heck of a lot more skills, capability, balance of soft and hard skills than ever before, which is perfect because, like that's what we're into. And,
exactly.
And I won't move into pitching mode, but yeah, that's why we deal with this topic, because it's fast and it's complex and it's ever changing. And because, both you and I are lifelong learners and it just kind of keeps us interested. Right. But just to go on,
go ahead and finish your thought and then we're going to wrap it up.
Yeah, no, I was just about to say, I think we need to move towards a close here, Tom.
What a good idea, Tim.
Thank you. I'll take that. What I was just going to say in moving towards a close is, just from this first conversation, I think the key thing that I would say, as a takeout for any leader who's watching this, whether you lead the household at home, whether you lead a team of you plus one in the workplace, or whether you've got 50,000 people reliant on you because you lead a massive network of hospitals or a global corporate, what I'd be saying to you is recognize that it is on you. 75% of the performance of your team is directly related to your performance. So invest in yourself. Recognize that what you knew last year about leadership is going to be vastly different to what you'll need next year. There's plenty of help out there and you need to use it. And if you've got all the answers, then please call me because I need your help. But apart from that, stay with us. And, we've got a lot that we want to talk about and explore in the coming months, weeks, years.
Absolutely. Look, some things don't change. General Electric in the United States got this in 1920. They knew that they needed to develop the leaders that they wanted to have running their company. And if you want great leaders, you have to develop them. They don't just happen. It's a learned skill that takes a lot of time, experience, and guidance. And unless you have the right guidance, you're not going to end up with the right product.
Yeah, so 100%. So thank you, everybody that is watching this now or will watch it in the future, for your time and attention. Next conversation, we're going to take the first of these focal foundational areas and we're going to do a deep dive on goals. So we'll see you there.
Yes, this is the Tim Tom Talk taking off.